Today's discussion will be presented in 3 sections, since we are recording this session for a radio broadcast on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. Our first section will focus on the as-is network situation. Next, we will discuss the future, which architectures and communications technologies are needed. And lastly, we'll explore practical matters like possible acquisition strategies for telecom services. Feel free to post questions and comments during the session, and we'll provide an answer to you quickly. We are particularly pleased to welcome our moderator, Tom Temin, the host and managing editor of the Federal Drive on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. Let me turn over the reins to Tom to begin today's discussion.
Welcome, and thanks for joining us. Our guests today are Bill Lewis. He's the Networks Program Manager in the Office of Integrated Technology Services at the General Services Administration. Keel Ross is Chief of Telecommunications at the Interior Department. Kimberly Hancher is Chief Information Officer at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And Tony Bardo, Assistant Vice President for Government Solutions at Hughes and EchoStar Company. Our topic today is the future of federal telecommunications networks, what services they'll need, strategies for buying it in the future. And before we get to the future, I think it's a good idea to maybe explore where we stand now. And we're lucky to have a large agency and its telecom and comm needs, and a smaller agency. You both have in common the fact that there's a lot of branch offices and a lot of intra-agency communications, as well as all that you do with the rest of the world. So, Keel, why don't we start with you and just give us an idea what your architecture is now, what your main applications are. Tell us what communications looks like at Interior.
Well, Department of the Interior is largely a MPLS network. The vast majority of our offices are like that. It's provided through a managed services network provider via GSA's Networks Universal Contract. We have about 2,600 locations spread across the United States and the protectorates, and they're all serviced by 5 primary gateways that are part of the Trusted Internet Connection. We're a self-service provider on that. We have 4 in the lower 48 and 1 up in Alaska.
So each tick is a thing you can point to.
That's correct. Internally, we sort of have one big telecommunications cloud, and the folks are 1 or 2 hops to get to a gateway. We've tried to get rid of a lot of the older hub and spoke type architecture.
All right, and what are some of the top applications? I mean, besides voice, I mean, what happens on this MPLS network?
Email and instant messaging these days are kind of the top applications that we're using. And of course, that touches every employee at that point. In the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen a huge increase in social media and streaming media usage, both to interact with the public as well as to interact internally. And then now telework is kind of driving folks sort of out of the office, but still their telecommunications needs are as great or maybe even greater, since they're not face to face with the other employees.
So you can see the morphing as toward the 2B happening already at this point in terms of applications.
That's definitely correct. And right now the next big driver is, of course, migration to cloud. Taking more and more of our applications outside of our own self-service data centers and having them managed by our cloud providers.
All right, and Kimberly at EEOC, again, smaller agency but widespread because you've got offices all over the place. What do you do now? What does it look like?
Well, the agency has 2,400 people and 53 offices around the country. We have a wide area network that I guess I would describe as dually provisioned, so 2 providers at each of the sites. We have an MPLS network with Sprint that provides a portion of our service. And then we also have a frame relay service with Verizon. Both are acquired through the network's contract. And I'm happy to say that we have 2 T1s going into every site, and it's just not cutting it anymore. So I've been looking for affordable ways to increase bandwidth, and we're going to be doing that on the Verizon side because they have recently added mesh network, MPLS, Ethernet private line service to their networks contract, and it's at an affordable rate for us.
I'm curious as to why the existing capacity doesn't cut it, because the agency's not growing and the federal government is not growing in terms of people. So, what is it that's affecting EEOC that's
Sure.
driving bandwidth?
It's all about the applications that really have been embraced by the workforce to do our work a little bit smarter. So what I'm talking about there is video teleconferencing, which has seen a huge growth. We've adopted it. It's part of our everyday work, and it really eats bandwidth. And then we do a lot of web meetings. And those web meetings are not just internally, but they're with other agencies, and they're also, with private sector. So video teleconferencing, web meeting, and to a lesser extent, VoIP. We have
Voice over IP.
Voice over IP is an area that I'd love to talk more about, maybe a little later.
Okay. And Bill, at the GSA, I mean, if networks was a day, it's about dinner time right now, because you're already planning for the next generation of contracts, to make it a 24-hour day. So what does the landscape look like from GSA and networks standpoint at this point?
Well, hopefully we're having an early dinner. Networks is a good representation of what we see in the federal market. Right now we're pacing to have about $1.5 billion in purchasing go through networks. About 86% is on the universal side, and 14% is on the enterprise side. We echo what Keel and Kimberly are seeing. About half the business we do on networks is an MPLS service. It's cryptically named network-based IP VPN, network-based Internet Protocol Virtual Private Networks. That's about half our business. Another 12% of the business is management around those services. So I think 55, 57%, are those two services alone. By management, I'll date myself a little bit. We'll call it FCAPS, fault configuration, accounting, performance, and the S is security management. That's pretty much the way networks has panned out. It is an MPLS-based acquisition vehicle. Voice.
We should probably define MPLS.
Multi-protocol label switch, and it is a protocol within Internet Protocol designed. Initially, it was kind of called tag switching, and it was designed to speed up the processing through routers. The way MPLS was designed, it allows you to define quality and classes of service for things like voice or video. So where performance is needed above that of another application, you can define that and set that aside within the network. Here's the interesting thing. 10 years ago, about 45% of our business was voice related, either traditional long-distance voice or toll-free service. Right now, our long-distance service has fell about 5% in purchasing first half of this year compared to first half of 13, and it accounts for less than 3% of our business. Voice is going other avenues. GSA, we have an aggressive telework policy, and I certainly use my VoIP phone on my laptop, but I also chat people. I also have web conferencing on demand. And all those drive demand on the MPLS network. We're seeing growth on networks, and I've tried the line. It's growth on networks because of excellent program management. But our suppliers and my colleagues and our customers kind of say, no, you're not doing good program management, Bill. It's because there's huge demand or spikes in demand for that MPLS traffic. And we're up about 25% year over year in IP virtual private, the network-based IP VPNs.
All right, so that drop in voice means people aren't calling each other. Is that why? They communicate by other means?
That's part of it. You've also got another channel. You've got a channel with your smartphone. So if you're making long distance call via that sort of device, it's no longer a call on the network. The pricing is also gone way down. I want to say we're less than a penny a minute on networks. So it's just less use and more channels and a lower price drive that.
Okay, and Tony Bardo, you have been following federal telecom for a long time. How is it evolving? What does the landscape look like from your point of view?
Well, per Bill's points, certainly, the price points on voice decreasing precipitously over the years, and as a percentage of the growth of data and video and so forth, certainly that percentage, those percentages are going to change. GSA over the years has just gotten a lot of things right. We're embarking now soon on the 5th generation of what used to be called the old FTS network contracts. And it's exciting to be a part of it, to be participating in it, and to anticipate what's to come. And as they build these contracts, they're either 7 or 8 or 10 years, whichever one you want to look at historically. And over those years, things happen in the marketplace. And GSA, whether they can make things available through the networks contract, make things available elsewhere, they seem to try to, always accommodate the changing market conditions. And so we're certainly at a point where the networks contract, has things that have been there and delivering all the time. Things have emerged and things have changed that is part of the reason we wanted to talk today about some of the new technologies available. But I think by and large we're, agencies are getting their needs met, but you see some strains in that. You see, I don't think I've talked to any federal agency where their customers, their users are saying, it's okay, I have plenty of bandwidth. I don't need any more bandwidth. And yet at the same time, those managers are saying, okay, well, maybe I need to add a T1 at these sites and so forth. Maybe, Kimberly's, experiencing that as well. Well, do you have the budget to necessarily do that? Is everybody's, while the bandwidth needs are increasing, everybody's, I'm sure, getting more budget here, right? You're getting more dollars to spend on telecom services. And that's sort of the conundrum we're in right now.
That's actually something that we had to make a savings in our IT budget in order to add to the telecom.
Right. Yeah, I imagine the telecom comes under that operations and maintenance, which the OMB is trying to get agencies to spend less of. Keel, do you find that there's pressure on the total spend there?
Yeah, definitely. There's a pressure to bring down those costs, and unfortunately, the telecom costs, because of the increased demand, kind of keep going up. So Interior's in the same boat, is trying to save in other places in IT.
And Kimberly, as the demand goes up, as you say, you need to add to these T1 lines because of application demands. Mm-hmm. Does the technology mix also change relative to what was there from the voice-oriented days, or just more of the same?
It's interesting. Last year, we were able to afford upgrades at 15 of our sites, and so we upgraded to something called a fractional T3. So it's kind of like 4 T1s. And so we quadrupled the bandwidth on one of our providers at 15 sites. But I couldn't afford to go further to the rest of the sites. But the technology that's offered on the other provider is now allowing me to basically move from frame relay, which is a different topology, okay? Mm-hmm. And a mesh network really makes more sense for the kinds of traffic patterns that we have among those sites, and it's affordable.
So just in terms of the data, what we see on the networks contract, the year-over-year compound annual growth rate for sub-rate is about -2%. That's less than 1.5 megabits per second. DS1, which had historically from, early on through, I want to say 2008, had been growing like gangbusters, is now flat. Think about it. Is 1.5 megabits per second when you have that going into your home enough? So you are see folks migrating towards higher bandwidth. Our T3 services are up 32%. still
not in pricing, but in
in
demand.
terms of demand
Right.
and purchases on the circuit. I'm not talking about dollars here. I'm talking about the number of services sold. Our 100 megabit Ethernet services up 25%. Between 200 and 500 megabits per second, up 106%. We're even seeing, 10 gig services. I want to say that's
That's a really big pipe.
yeah, an OC 192, up 21%. Bigger and bigger pipes. I'm a bureaucrat. I'm not a predictor, but my guess is, I'm going to see the DS1s drop over the years. And my guess, to be honest with you, is I'm going to see the rate and growth on DS3s also drop. And I suspect that the demand is really going to occur at that 100 megabit and that 200 megabit native Ethernet coming from the building. And that's kind of what the trends are showing on that. So it's really been a market change since the award of the network's contract. A DS1, when I began my career, man, that was great. I remember I used to be a comm engineer for ExxonMobil, and we put in a DS3, and we thought that was huge. And this was back in the early 90s. Not so much anymore.
And Tony, in the marketplace, what is the mechanism by which pricing changes? I mean, we expect most prices to go down over time, like the voice, even the old voice switch costs. So do carriers find that their costs drop, or is it simply price pressure from customers? What's the pricing mechanism in the market?
Well, it's a little of both. What you see is certainly through competition, which GSA generated. You think back to the days when you had one vendor, and I go back to those days, but you also then two, and then now 3 to 5, depending on the contract vehicle. The competition keeps things fresh, and the agencies are adept at doing the fair opportunities and so forth. So certainly you've seen that. On the cost side, I'm not so sure so much because, in many ways you have sort of dominant monopoly access providers. That last mile is sort of the very important part of all this. I remember at one point in this market, access was 50% of the cost of a service, right? I don't know what that is anymore, but it's still high. So that's where economies can be achieved through alternate technologies. The kind of networks that have evolved over the GSA contracts over the years have done what they've done inside their quote-unquote cloud in their network infrastructure. That last piece has always been the dedicated access pipe.
All right, we're going to talk more about cloud. Right now we need to take a break. Our guests today are Tony Bardo, Assistant Vice President for Government Solutions at Hughes and EchoStar Company, Kimberly Hancher, Chief Information Officer at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, Keel Ross, Chief of Telecommunications at the Interior Department, Bill Lewis, the Networks Program Manager in the Office of Integrated Technology Services at the General Services Administration. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin, on Connected Government, How to Build and Procure Network Services for the Future. This is a panel discussion sponsored by Hughes and EchoStar Company here on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com.